right, we're back on the reckoning, rolling into the second half of the hour. I'm very glad now to turn our attention to the congressional race. That's right, we've got primary day on Tuesday, in case you've forgotten. I don't think you have. We've talked about it nonstop every day. Tuesday, August 4, there's a big Republican primary in the brand new 5th Congressional District here in Missouri. That stretches all the way from Kansas City out east toward us in the middle part of the state. Of course, our 107.3 listeners down there. I've got Mr. Taylor Burks on, running for Congress in that crowded field right now. I'm glad to get a chance to hear from him, his priorities, his background, and why you might want to cast your vote for him on Tuesday. Taylor Burks, how are you doing, sir? Thank you for being with me for a few minutes.
I'm great, Ryan. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, I am so glad to do it. I've heard your name quite a bit. I'm actually not in the 5th District, but of course, all eyes on it, because in this new 7-1 map that our legislature has passed, of course, District 5 has gotten quite a bit of attention and a very crowded Republican field. So there's a number of you running, and your name has come up over and over again from a lot of folks I know. So I'm very interested to hear a little bit of your background, what led you to this run for Congress, and why you would hope people would give you the opportunity to go and face a Democrat and then hopefully serve. Of course, we're going up against Emanuel Cleaver here, who has long held down this seat, but not in this exact district boundary. So what brought you to this?
Well, a little bit about my background. I'm a 5th-generation cattleman. Grew up on my grandparents' cattle farm in southwest Missouri. So a lot of your listeners and station here is closer to home where I grew up. Went to college, and then I joined the Navy. So I've served 19 years in the United States Navy, now as a commander, and just got back from my 4th deployment overseas. So I would say somewhat uniquely among candidates in this race, I'm the only serious candidate from mid-Missouri and the only candidate with an agriculture or farm background. So when I got back from deployment, saw that Missouri had redrawn our boundaries for this new 5th Congressional District, I thought we really needed a candidate who could speak to mid-Missouri voters while also understanding what it's like to go into the blue parts of our state. That's Columbia, Kansas City, and try to explain to people why conservative government is far better than the liberal governments that they have in those places. Ends up, I'm the guy that kind of fits the bill out of mid-Missouri who could do that. So that's why I got in the race.
That's awesome to hear. And I'll tell you, just from looking over your website, following you online, you told me you served 19 years in the Navy. I'm like, that guy's not old enough to have served for almost 20 years. And then I realized I've been working in politics for 20 years. I'm that old now, too. So it worries me a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this, because obviously you're asking for a federal seat here. We, of course, are watching so much deadlock in Congress. I mean, there are a number of America First priorities that the base wants to see done that I think, quite frankly, the majority of the country wants to see done. They gave that stamp of approval in the November 2024 presidential election. What are your specific priorities, if given the chance, to head to the halls of Congress, not just to represent Missourians, but to see some of this agenda go through that is good for the nation? Of course, you've spent 20 years defending it. What are your priorities if given that chance?
Yeah, well, the reality is, historically, the National Defense Authorization and the Farm Bill have been bipartisan policies that both parties have supported. And this year, Emanuel Cleaver voted against both of those bills because it was led by Republicans and supported President Trump's America First priorities. And so the reality is we need a congressman who understands that historically, a lot of stuff that comes out of government, a lot of stuff that's needed here in Missouri and across the country, like the National Defense Authorization and the Farm Bill, should be bipartisan. And we've got to kick out the people like Emanuel Cleaver who aren't willing to work on those things. The other thing that I have some experience and background working on is election policy. I was the Boone County Clerk, the first and only Republican to hold that position, where I ran elections in one of Missouri's blue counties, won more votes than any other Republican in Boone County in that year. But when we talk about the Save America Act, when we talk about reasonable election policies that something like 80% of Americans agree and believe in, policies like photo ID or voter ID, policies like proof of American citizenship to register to vote, paper ballots that we can audit on the back end. These are reasonable things that I've done. And when you go to Washington, D.C., and you talk to your colleagues, even those in the middle across the aisle, and say, hey, I've actually done this. This isn't rhetoric from some think tank or some super PAC in Washington, D.C. I'm a guy who served our country and served back home in running elections. This is why we need these regional policies, and to pass it, I think you start to see some of this gridlock grind down when you have serious people who are serving in these offices.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is. It's become more divisive than ever before, more us against them, but also really not just even Republican and Democrat, us against them when it comes to, which of course you named the Farm Bill and the NDAA, both of which just often get criticized so badly for being laden with pork projects or special interest spending and the omnibus nature of them. I mean, there is a host of things to clean up, but let me drill down on elections for a second, because you represent, one side of the equation here, which of course the Save America Act, I think you're absolutely right. I support it, almost 80% support from the American people of all parties. Really, it receives a majority. And yet this also, at least for us as Republicans, as conservatives, brings in a balance where you've worked in, state elections as a county clerk. There's a balance here of where the federal government lays down how the elections are supposed to work. Here are the regulations and the rules, who can vote, how it should happen. And then the states are the ones who enact it. Of course, we got a lot of states that don't want to play along with what you and I would probably call good common sense rules that secure elections. Where do you strike the balance now that you're asking to go to the federal side of that, where a lot of states, good states even, like we've had some issues here in Missouri, say, hold on a minute, I want election integrity, but I don't want more federal lists, more federal compliance and noses into what we're doing, because this just opens the door for a lot of stuff later on down the road. What does that balance look like for you?
Yeah, well, I appreciate that question, because when I was county clerk, I was one of those that said more federal involvement causes bigger problems when Missouri's already doing these things right. But then you look at states like California, Oregon, Washington, where they have mail-in ballots. It takes weeks for them to count their results. And, the fact of the matter is, if we don't have some federal standard or some federal baseline to say this is what we all agree across the country we're going to do as a minimum, then you don't have fair elections when it comes to national elections. If California and Oregon and Washington can have mail-in ballots where anybody's filling out a ballot, supposed to be for a specific voter, but anybody gets that ballot, fills it out, and returns it, that weights a national election like the presidential elections or U.S. Senate and U.S. House elections in favor of the states that are willing to at least have rules in place that allow cheaters to cheat. So you have to have that baseline level of rules or playing field so that fairness does exist across the country. We already have some of that too. HAVA exists. That's the Help America Vote Act from about 20-some years ago, where funding from the federal government for security measures, machines, election equipment that we know does pose some risk in our election security. Those are things that the federal government has already passed and states have implemented 20, 30 years ago. And so the Save America Act follows in that vein and says, hey, let's get back to paper ballots. Let's get back to ensuring that only citizens are voting. Let's get back to making sure that if you're giving a driver's license to illegal immigrants, you're not also registering them to vote, and just basically protecting American citizens from having our votes diluted by people who shouldn't be voting.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right, and I appreciate your perspective on that. One last thing I'll ask you here in our final 2 or so 3 minutes together. I do want to know kind of your thoughts on this. Of course, we are torn right now, and this just addressed actually in the segment before you. This conflict in Iran is really driving at this point some very strong opinions inside the right wing, inside the world of America First, Make America Great Again, the Trump support base. A lot of folks who'd like to see us get away from it, and then a lot of other folks who would like to say, no, let's just finish this off. It's 20 years in the making, or frankly, 40 plus years in the making. Let's get it done. When it comes to this, you're asking for power over the purse there in Congress. That's going to have a pretty heavy hand in this. What are your thoughts about where we are, where U.S. policy needs to go? Obviously, Congress doesn't direct foreign policy, but you guys do control the funding of it, and you have a firsthand view of what it looks like to use military readiness around the world. What would be your thought process as hopefully this is done before you get there in January, but if it's not, what are you thinking?
I agree, and I hope so as well. One, let me point out, Ryan, that I'm the only candidate for Congress in the country who has deployed 2 times under President Trump. I deployed in 2020 to the Middle East under President Trump, and I deployed this last year to the Far East in the South China Sea under President Trump. And so I have a firsthand view of how effective President Trump's foreign policy is. I don't know the specific intel or whatever he saw that motivated the president to make this decision and start this conflict with Iran. What I do say is I agree. One, I trust the president a lot in the foreign policy realm. He's demonstrated over the last 12 years that he's particularly astute at making America safer, but also getting our allies to get off their butts and do more for our collective safety that has never been done. But second of all, this is a problem that he inherited. Whatever he saw in the last 6 months that motivated him to take action against Iran, Congress has to have a role in determining how long we stay in this conflict. I am supremely confident that we are trying to get to a resolution in the short term rather than the long term. So one, I trust the president. Two, Congress does have a constitutional role to determine, to approve funds and do these things. And three, I'm willing to give the president some leeway in this conflict so that we can have a safer and more peaceful world based on what he's proven he's willing to do over the last 2 terms that he's been in office.
Yeah. Excellent. I appreciate that balanced answer and very, very good. Folks, Taylor Burks running for Congress in the Missouri's 5th. You can find him online, burksforcongress.com. He's on Facebook and Twitter as well. That's BURKS, burksforcongress.com. Taylor, thank you so much for your time. I wish you all the best on Tuesday.
Thanks, Ryan. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. We'll talk again. Folks, we'll be back on The Reckoning, another segment this hour.